Hey guys, I hope you're doing well. I enjoyed class today. I wanted to address and share a awesome question that one of your fellow students shot to me in regards to the reading, and it was on the topic of dancing mania and what my thoughts were on that and what may have caused it. I digested it for a little bit, did a little bit of research, and the general consensus in terms of the contributing factors is multiple. So nobody really has a 100% explanation in terms of why that particular event took place. Um, what I will say, and some of the agreements or arguments that I agree with, is it is not manic behavior. What it tends to fall into is something that we would refer to as mass hysteria or hysteria. What we often see when we talk about mass hysteria or hysteria is also something common to conversion disorder. And I'll talk about that in just a second. So think about this. Again, sociological, psychological concept has a lot to do with thought processes in perception. So, a good example of mass hysteria is, let's say, um, a certain disease or a certain condition all of a sudden becomes apparent, okay, within a society. And based upon that, it is then exposed through, let's say, social media outlets, news, whatever it may be, word of mouth, okay, whether it's real or not. Now, based upon that, okay, people psychologically buy into that, all right, and then they start to think they have it, all right, whether they really do or don't. That's kind of what conversion disorder is. So, conversion disorder, very fascinating disorder. Someone all of a sudden becomes paralyzed or they become blind or whatever, but there is no physical explanation in terms of why those things are happening. Okay. It's something psychological. If any of you guys have ever seen, I believe it's Band of Brothers, fantastic documentary series. Tom Hanks was in it talking about the World War. There was a scene that pops up in my mind where one of the soldiers was really exposed. Obviously, I mean, all of it was trauma, but I believe saw someone die, someone next to him, and he couldn't see. All of a sudden, he couldn't see anymore. Well, there was nothing physically wrong with him. Psychologically, the trauma actually impacted him, and psychologically, all of a sudden, he wasn't able to be able to do something. Okay, that's conversion disorder. Again, with mass hysteria, these certain events may pick up, and then all of a sudden, just like it sounds, everybody starts to kind of buy into it psychologically. They think they have it, whatever it may be, for whatever that particular reason. Other explanations in terms of dance and mania that I read about was things in terms of like the food supplies that may have contributed. That people were eating certain types of rye, and those things were toxic. That may have caused them all to hallucinate, become delusional, have this type of manic behavior. But again, based upon the evidence and the arguments that I've read into, I think it falls a little bit more into the argument of mass hysteria. And again, that's when some particular event, some piece of information is shared, and it tends to be very traumatizing for a big group of people. There's a lot of miscommunication, a lot of misinformation out there, and what you get is hysteria. You get a lot of people really panicking or kind of jumping into this particular type of behavior. So I hope that kind of gives you guys a little bit better idea on my 2 cents on that particular topic. If not, feel free to shoot me an email on top of that. I also had another great question that I wanted to share with you, was that if schizophrenia, for an example, does not run in your family at all, and you abuse drugs significantly, for a long period of time. And eventually, because those drugs are changing your brain chemistry, you take away those drugs and you hallucinate, you're delusional, and you eventually get the diagnosis of schizophrenia. Could that then put your kids, for an example, at higher risk in terms of passing that trait on genetically? That's a really, really good question. I did a little bit of research after class, and I really didn't find much in terms of that. The things that I did find was a lot of studies in terms of the obvious that drug use and so forth can obviously have a negative impact in terms of our infertility and things like that. I will say, my personal feeling is that because you're changing the chemistries within your brain and so forth, I think it would be almost impossible not to think that something would be passed on. Now, I don't mean that that child of that person would be full-blown schizophrenic. I don't mean that they would have hallucinations or whatever, but I think it would be unrealistic to think that they would be 100% totally healthy. I think there would be something that might be there, whatever it may be, down the road. And again, we really don't know. I mean, because as we've been talking about throughout this class, nothing is 100%. Nothing is black and white. Everything is gray. So it really depends upon the individual, depends upon the setting, depends upon multiple variables down the road. And again, something like that, we really can't do research on. It just simply is just unethical in terms of it. One of your other classmates brought up the great question about utilizing alcohol as a prescribed medication, so to speak, in terms of helping people cope. Again, there have been minimal studies that have been out there in terms of pregnant women and the benefits of drinking a glass of wine. Again, ethically, we really can't dive into studies such as that in terms of it. So we tend to fall more on the safe side and saying, no, you shouldn't do that. No, you can't do that. Again, because there's such a risk in terms of what can happen on the negative side. So hopefully that kind of answers some fantastic questions that you guys passed along my way. I'll post a resource in regards to mass hysteria that you can take a look at in addition to this video. Other than that, feel free to shoot me more questions. I love answering these questions on these particular topics. All right, thanks, guys. Enjoy the rest of your day.